So yes, thank you very much for attending. We really, really appreciate everybody coming along to see this remarkable person. And of course, the artwork is the remarkable thing, but it's about the person behind that art. And I think this month, or maybe last month, is the 50th anniversary of Graham's first major exhibition at the Lee Cramp Gallery with Mr. Webb, I believe. So that's quite a remarkable milestone. And obviously, I want to do something unconventional and start at the start. And Grahame, you had that most rare of things, very supportive parents. But they said to you, if you're going to be an artist, you've got to treat it like a job. And that's something that you've obviously carried through your entire career.
Yes, thank you for coming, everybody. Just my little thanks for coming out on a day like this and being interested. I always appreciate it. My family situation was this. I'm the youngest of three. I was 5 years later than my sister, and being that autumn leaf, late arrival, unexpected, I think, unplanned. I won't say unwanted, because I always felt wanted, and I was spoilt to hell as the baby. So everything that I wanted and did, I had fantastic support from mum and dad. They weren't artistic, but they were indulgent. So the fact that I was, from an early age, fascinated by what could happen on a two-dimensional sheet of paper with just a pencil, the magic of that occupied me very early on. And mum and dad just gave me everything I asked for and all the praise in the world. So the family environment was extremely supportive, and I think is the reason why I became a painter, along with a great deal of luck. The first bit of luck was being born into that parenting and that environment, but the second was my love of, my fascination with it, with this extraordinary business of what you can do with lines and colours and things on a sheet of paper. And I was given every opportunity to learn. I'm not a natural talent. I don't like talent. I don't like the idea of talent. But I love the idea that a natural, inborn delight in something and love of something can be encouraged into something much greater than anyone expected. And that's me.
And you went on your OE, and it was deeply disappointing, I think you remember you saying. And while you were in the UK, these landscapes haunted your dreams. Did you return to New Zealand itching to paint these landscapes in particular, or did you start elsewhere?
Yeah, this needs a bit of background too, I'm afraid. Through my teenage years, it sort of emerged that I would love to be a painter. I really would love to. But that was New Zealand in the 1960s. Now, I'm 76 now, much to my amazement and horror as well. So those of you who are from my era might remember New Zealand in the 1960s art world. It was dominated by the Callagher. New Zealand painting was dominated by the Callagher Award in the late 50s and early 60s. And there weren't dealers. There were art shops, which mainly framed and had on their walls, like in Dunedin, Abernethy's on the corner of Moray Place. They had floor-to-ceiling prints framed elaborately, mainly English, but almost no interest in what was happening in New Zealand. I went through university in the late 1960s, doing English, because although I was painting at home all the time in my bedroom, there was no chance at all, no thought that there was a career in it. It was amateur. The Otago Arts Society wasn't a society of professional painters, it was a society of amateurs who painted at weekends and who did other things to survive, which is what I thought I would do. That was the norm. And I became a teacher for a couple of years. But always painting and always having this dream, impossible dream, that there might be a chance to be a full-time painter. There were full-time painters, but they were all painting New Zealand Kalaha landscapes. Scenic wonder, you know, the glamour, the romance of the New Zealand landscape. In fact, the Kalaha Award required that that's what the paintings were about. I didn't want to be one of those. So I didn't think there was a chance that I could survive being the sort of painter I imagined I might be, until the Benson and Hedges Art Award came along. Those of you old and bald like me will remember the Benson and Hedges. It was radical. And it suddenly showed painters and artists in New Zealand who weren't doing the romantic scenery. They were doing personal things. They were doing things which were much more related to the contemporary art world from Europe and Australia and so on, all of a sudden. And that went hand in hand in the early 1970s, late 1960s, with the gradual emergence of New Zealand identifying itself as being independent and separate from Britain. Remember, in '66, New Zealand got ousted, Britain joined the EEC, and we were suddenly cast adrift to be on our own. And alongside that went the cultural awakening that we didn't need English, Australian, American approval. The cultural cringe started to be diminished, started to reduce. And with it became this fascination, grew a fascination with those painters in New Zealand who were doing things that weren't just looking out the window and celebrating in sort of tourist promotional terms what the landscape looked like. And here comes the Benson and Hedges, and for the first time I saw paintings by people like Don Binney and Ralph Hotary and Mike Smither and all sorts of names like that have become the major names in New Zealand in my life. And it was an absolute revelation for me. I thought it was fabulous. And I had them on my wall of my bedroom. They did a calendar, and I ripped the calendar to bits and pinned Don Binney up and pinned up one of Brent Wong's paintings, never imagining for a moment that I would ever be able to meet them or be in a similar show to them. But that was the inspiration for me to keep doing the sort of thing I wanted to do, which was a little different to simply looking out the window. I had done that as a teenager in the Otago Art Society, watercolours of Arrowtown in autumn. Still got them. Mum kept everything, incidentally. But you mature slightly, and the more you read about art history and so on. And while I was teaching, I kept working. I kept painting in the free time that I had. And I had a show in Dunedin in late 1972 at Shona McFarlane's Moray Gallery, and it was everything that I'd done up to that point. And it sold out, mainly to friends and family. But the fact that it sold out gave me this lunatic notion that I was on my way. So I was on my way to England, because that's the only place you could survive as a painter. That's where every major New Zealand painter went. And I went too in early 1973, believing that I would become famous and rich over there, and telling Mum that I wouldn't come back. And it was awful. I hated every second of it, literally. And in my letters home over the 18 months I was away, not being a painter, incidentally, not surviving, I didn't have the money to be a painter. I had to drive trucks and teach in primary schools and secondary schools and work on my relative's dairy farm and things like that. I hardly painted at all. I was profoundly homesick. And my letters home, this is a very long-winded answer. You're going to get used to this. My letters home were my connection with what I was missing most. And yes, it's true, I was having extremely vivid dreams about home and about Central Otago mainly, which is my territory. It's where, we had a house in Arrowtown since 1962 when I was just young. So I knew it very well. And in London, in this depression, in the grey and miserable poverty of London, I was dreaming of Central Otago, vivid as hell, and writing home about it. And Mum and Dad got sick and tired of these letters. So after a while they said, come home. What they didn't say was, we've had enough of this bloody miserable, letters home. Come home and we'll give you a year's free board and lodging if you go back to your bedroom and paint like you haven't done in England, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. And that was enough for me. I came home. And I was really glad to come home. The being away taught me where I belonged and what mattered to me. And that's the lesson of my lifetime. That was such a profoundly important lesson. I wanted to make my paintings. I felt so misplaced, is it, in England. My dad was from London, but I felt no connection with it whatsoever, and I didn't want to do anything visually with it except take photographs of the sad creatures around Spitalfield, standing around fires and things like that. I did almost nothing in painterly terms. I did a still life for my mother's birthday and sent it home. It had nothing to do with where I was. So I came home having learned the lesson that I wanted to be at home, I wanted to be in the south, and I wanted to try to paint the things that had obviously haunted me and that mattered. And in that year, the plan was that we would take sort of a 5-year dream to try and move from a show in Dunedin, as I had it shown as gallery, and maybe if that worked, I wouldn't need Mum and Dad's support anymore, and I would have a show in Christchurch, and maybe if that worked, the following year I'd get to Wellington, and the year after that I might get to Auckland. My God, I never imagined it possible, but that was the plan, and I settled into this 5-year plan immediately I got home, and upstairs in my bedroom, and I was doing an egg tempera because I thought that would be a way of getting attention. No one in New Zealand was doing egg tempera, but I loved it. I had done 1 or 2 before I left, and I thought that was the best way for me to get some notice, because you have to be known to be there. People have got to know you exist. And I was doing my first egg tempera for nearly 2 years, and literally, some of you will know the story, there was a knock on the door midweek in Dunedin. Mum answered the door. I thought it was Mr. Barnard, the vegetable man, who had a truck, who used to come around the neighbourhoods and sell vegetables to the wives on a routine every week. I thought it was Mr. Barnard, but it wasn't. Mum came upstairs with a very beautifully dressed, handsome man, very dapper man, and I had no idea who he was. And when he left a couple of hours later, he had not only bought the painting I was doing for $160, wasn't even finished, and he had promised to buy everything I finished from that day on, which he did. And that was Peter Webb, starting out as a dealer in Auckland in May 1974, that was. And Peter said, you finish them, I'll buy them. End of story. He didn't say, but they have to be this, or they have to be that, or this size, or whatever. He didn't say anything like that. He said, "You finish them, I'll buy them." And he did. And he left the cheque for $160. I'll finish on this note. He left the cheque, and Dad came home at lunchtime, as he always did, for hot dinner at Sydney's house. And Mum and I said to him, "You never believe what happened this morning. This bloke arrived. He's apparently from Auckland, and he's told me he wants to buy everything that I do. And he's left this cheque, $160. And Dad, who was an accountant, said, "You better give me that cheque, son. I'll have it looked into." He's from Auckland. And about a week later, Dad came home at lunchtime and said, "Oh, you know that cheque that joker left?" He said, "It's all right. There's money in that account. You must be all right." That's how it started for me. That's how lucky you get.
It's a remarkable story. Now, talking a bit about the art itself, Grahame, you shocked me when I spoke to you several months ago. You referred to yourself as a salvage expert, and that you never know what's going to come out of your mind onto that canvas when you start, but all you know is you're trying to fix things the entire time. Could you take us a little bit through your process?
It's not that I don't know what's going to come. It's just that almost whenever I start a painting, I start full of hope and optimism that something wonderful will happen, and it never does. It never does. Within a day of starting, I'm in trouble, almost inevitably. It's a process of high hope, instant depression and plummet and gloom, and from there on, salvage. Trying to make something of the idea that has been strong enough for you to begin. You've got to trust the instinct that calls you to start the process of trying to make something permanent out of an idea. Something you've seen, something you can't forget, something you want to investigate. Not always certain why. I very seldom know why. All I know is that it's a powerful calling, and that you have to trust that instinct. That instinct is what separates me from you and everyone here. We all have our own private whispering voices about what's right for us and what isn't. And as an artist, you have to trust that instinct, because it's the point of difference between you and everyone else. It's very easy to teach people technical competence. I could teach everyone in this room how to paint, how to push paint around effectively, if you give me the time, and if you have the love of it, which keeps you going when you're getting pissed off with it, and it's hard. If the love of it's strong, you'll keep learning and keep making things, and by making things you improve, you learn. But the most important thing of all is that I cannot teach you your instinct, your whispering private voice. And that's what makes you interesting. Not your technical ability, because that's universal. Anyone who can be bothered can be technically competent. And that's not what makes art good. That's not where quality is. Quality is when each individual instinct, separate, unique, unlike you, unlike me, finds a way of being demonstrated and expressed as that individual, recognizable and separate and not like you. And learning to trust that instinct is the hardest job of all. And that's the great virtue of being given time to be a painter. Amateurs who fit their art and their creativity into small slots around other things have a very much lower learning graph. If you are a full-timer, given the beauty, the extraordinary gift of a full-time opportunity like Peter Webb gave me, when you're a full-timer, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, doing nothing but, your learning is far more rapid. It's exponential. That's the gift I was given by Peter Webb and by my mum and dad. I learned how to trust my separateness, my uniqueness, my oddity, my points of difference, and I was given the time to give them an opportunity to be developed and seen, and a style and a subject, a thematic area, which really mattered to me in a way that it didn't matter to the person sitting beside me. That's the story of my so-called career, is a story of extraordinary good fortune, being given that opportunity and learning very, very quickly how important it is to not listen to anyone else. I don't care who objects to this, but the best lesson I can give any young aspiring artist of any variety is don't listen to anyone. Listen to the instinctive, silent voice that only you have. You're the only one that can hear it. And that's what will make whatever you produce interesting to other people. And in this room, you'll see works from so many different hands and personalities. They are so different personalities. Their temperaments are not like me. It's important that I try to find a form for my temperament. And when you look at what I do and ask yourself the question, what sort of person made this? As opposed to, let's say, Ray Ching. What sort of person must he be that could come up with something like that? He's clearly different to me, let alone John Walsh and everyone else, and Dick Frizzell and Billy Apple and all the rest. That's the great joy of art, that you get an insight into what it's like being someone else.
Yes, you always said the maker is, the context of the maker is important, is hugely important. In terms of what's on the canvas, you've also said that none of your paintings are about honesty. Can you explain that a little bit?
Early on, because of who I am and what I'm like, and you can see what I'm like, I'm very conventional. I wish I wasn't. For decades, I wished I was someone else. I would love to be much more extravagant and flamboyant and interesting. But I'm not. I come from this much more conventional background. I hated being on the dance floor as a teenager. When everyone else was going to socials and dancing to the Beatles, I was just crippled with embarrassment about how stupid it all was. And I couldn't be that person, much as I wanted to. I'd love to have been that person. I still would. My gorgeous wife still hates the fact that I've never danced with her. But I find it deeply embarrassing. That's me. I can't imagine for a moment Dick Frizzell would hesitate to get up on the dance floor and show everyone what he can do. But as Clive James once said, I'm not a wallflower, I'm a wall stain. That's me. That's my type of character. What are we talking about here? I forgot. Honesty. Yeah. So I always wanted to be a realist, really. I mean, early on, when I was 14 and 15, and learned that the Impressionists existed, I tried to be one. But I didn't know how to do that. And it didn't feel right. They were terrible. It just wasn't me. I always loved the idea, the magic of being able to represent the real world, in inverted commas, in paint. How incredible. The stuff, that you just push around and you come up with these things that look like the real world. I thought that was magnificent. 17th century Dutch Vermeer, for example, is an absolute hero for me. I find that fascinating and wonderful in the extreme. I'm not an expressionist, as you can tell. So I find myself in this realm of, which is now in many quarters completely out of favour, which is representing a sort of realist version of the world through my temperament, filtered through my temperament. And because it's filtered, and I'm not photo dependent, a camera has no personality. A camera has one eye, no experience, no history, no chemistry, nothing that makes humans interesting. A camera is a cold bit of machinery with one eye and no brain. Certainly no story to tell. If you rely on the camera for your, and slavishly copy what the camera does, you're eliminating the most interesting thing of all, which I hope I'm getting across to you, which is the individual behind the hand and the life and the experience behind that hand, and how different that individual is to you. But because I'm supposedly representing a realist version of the world, people think that it's honest. Realism is not honesty. It's just a style. And I happily say that none of my paintings are honest. It's what has been said by someone much more eloquent than me as beautiful lies. You don't know what was true in any of these, or anything I've ever done. I know what was true. And I'm telling you that what you get given inside the world of the frame, which is a separate world, a new world, is not true. It's what I want you to believe. You don't know what I've left out, what I've changed, what I've decided should be shifted. What shouldn't be there at all? It's gone. I could tell you endless stories about what was true in any image I've done. We're not talking honesty. We're talking me, this individual, trying to make something memorable that matters to me in the hope that it might matter to someone else. But basically, I never care about the audience, I never think of them. No painter should ever, no artist should ever consider the audience. Forget it. You're working for yourself. You're working to please yourself and to give yourself that opportunity to explore an idea that you cannot let go, that's nagging at you for some reason. That's the instinct. And you see what happens. You see what comes out. The moment you start thinking of the audience, you're nothing but a commercial artist because you're pleasing someone else. This business, in my view, is wholly egotistical. It's about pleasing no one but me. So we're not talking honesty, ever. It might be called realism, but it's not truth.
And does that extend to the figure painting and interiors as well? That's a broad perspective that you bring to everything you create, not just the landscapes.
Yep. Yeah, it does extend to that. The figure paintings are an interesting domain, and I want to talk about them just briefly. There's only one example here. Most of my work has been landscape because it's me trying to leave behind the evidence of what I love and what I care about and what I think has mattered to me. But I've been aware through my reading and experience of galleries overseas, of course, how hugely significant the human figure has been in Western art. Curiously, almost none in New Zealand art. It's just like sport. When you think of the dominance of sport in New Zealand culture, where are the paintings? There's almost none. Tell me, apart from the odd one by Garth Tapper, tell me where there's a rugby painting. For all the extraordinary dominance of rugby in New Zealand culture, there's no art about it. Mike Smither did a couple, I think. There's some drawings, but I can hardly think of any. And it's the same with the figure. Apart from Eve Page and one or two others, there's almost no interest in the human figure in New Zealand art. Why is that? You'll all have answers, your own answers for that, explanations. But for me, I became aware of it, that the human figure is probably the hardest challenge to do a beautiful painting using the human figure. It's so damn difficult, so complicated. And everybody knows when you get it wrong, because we're used to seeing the human figure. You're not used to seeing the landscapes that I do, because you probably just drive past them and don't notice the way I do. But we all know when a human figure is drawn badly or painted badly and doesn't work. And in the middle of the 80s, my beloved dad started a downward spiral from prostate cancer into bone cancer, and he died. And I watched this process over a year. My lovely dad disintegrating before my eyes, really, and dissolving and disappearing, and becoming a hollow shell of the man that I love so much. And it occurred to me that the same was possible for me. I could go any time. This was 1986. And I'd better do something serious. This is the way I was thinking. And the only way to prove whether I was any good or not, was to address this problem of the human figure, even though no one else in New Zealand was bothered with it. Or almost nobody else. And I had a friend who was happy to model, and that was a great gift to me, really. I wanted to use the human figure, especially the female figure, as a symbol, as an example of what good health looked like, how beautiful good health was. Because I was watching my father collapsing away from everything that good health represented, and fighting hopelessly against cancer. And I thought, there's nothing more extraordinary and wondrous than a beautiful, healthy human. And the Western art tradition was full of it. So I set about doing some paintings of this friend, and I did about 6 of them. My mother hated the fact that I was doing them. She said, I wish you wouldn't, this is a quote, I wish you wouldn't do that stuff, son. Really embarrassed that I was doing naked women. And I tried to explain to her that all I was trying to do was I was hoping these were beautiful, Mum. This is how beautiful, healthy life can look at a gorgeous stage of life. Is there anything more beautiful than this? And anyway, it didn't work. Mum wouldn't look at them. And neither would most other people. I had 6 paintings finished for the first time in my life that nobody wanted. And this is Dunedin. And they were all about this size. I thought I was really pleased with them. It was thrilling. I loved doing them. Still do. And I had a dealer in Sydney who rang me up and said, we're doing a Christmas show. Have you got anything you could give us? And I said, look, I've got nothing. I've only got these damn figure paintings that no one wants. And he said, well, send one over. So I did, 1986. Dad had a few months to live. And I sent this painting over. And the week my father died in Dunedin Hospital, I got a phone call from Robin Gibson saying, the show's up, we've got someone who wants your figure painting. And it was $6,000. And Robin said, he wants a discount. And I'm taking this call knowing that my dad's got days to live, so I'm a bit distracted and not very empathetic to a call like that. And I said, I don't give a bugger. I'm not going to discount anything. You can discount it if you want to, but not off what I get. I think I was getting about $4,000 for it or something. And he said, oh, I think you should. It's Elton John. And I said, I don't care who it is. If it's Elton John, he can pay the full price. Anyway, he did. Elton John did pay the full price. And I forgot about it because Dad was, I was preoccupied with losing my dad. And the ODT, the Otago Daily Times in Dunedin, got wind of this. So I must have told friends or something. And to my astonishment, they did a front page story about local boy sells painting to Elton John. And it was the actual week Dad died that the story came out. And the editor said to me, it's the first time I've ever had a naked woman on the front page of the ODT. Anyway, it got all this coverage. And within a week, all of those paintings had sold. Every one of them in the studio that no one else wanted.
Can you explain a bit about egg tempera? It's obviously something you're well known for, and it's not something that's seen very often. Can you take us through a bit of the process of that style of painting?
Egg tempera, none of these are temperas, these are all oils. But for the first 20 years of my professional life, I did nothing but egg temperas pretty well. Did some watercolours, but mainly egg tempera. I thought that it would be of interest to the wider public, and I was conscious that if I was going to survive, I had to get attention. You have to be known, as I said before. And I had done a couple of egg temperas when I was a teacher's college student. Learning about the Renaissance, I'd learned that a lot of them painted in egg tempera, like Botticelli, let alone others. And I thought it looked lovely. And an early teacher of mine, Saturday morning art classes, showed me a Saturday Evening Post article about an American called Andrew Wyeth, who painted in egg tempera. And I looked at those and thought, they're beautiful. I loved them. I loved what it looked like egg tempera could do. So I set about learning what it was and wrote away for books on it and that sort of thing. That was in the days when you used libraries for reasons like that, not Google. And it turned out to be very easy, except you needed raw pigment. Egg tempera is nature's simplest paint. Egg tempera is raw pigment. Pigment is not paint. Pigment is just colour. Colour becomes paint when it's got something to glue it up. Until then, it's just colour. But oil paint is glued up by linseed oil or walnut oil or poppy seed oil. And egg tempera is glued up by the yolk of an egg mixed with water, which is an emulsion like milk. And the water evaporates, leaving behind the oil particles. And the oil particles, which are a natural part of any emulsion, which is what makes milk cloudy, the water evaporates away and the oil particles remain behind and glue up the pigment. And that's all it is. It's a water-based paint. You paint it with watercolour brushes. And it doesn't like being washed on. You don't do washes like watercolour. You can't use big brushes. You have to sort of use small brushes and weave it up. And that's all egg tempera is. But it's a beautiful medium and it suits my temperament because I love building paintings. I'm not instantaneous and impulsive and extravagant like that, like an expressionist would be. I'm a builder. And I have been all the time. I can't help it. And I've stopped regretting it. That's me now. And it always has been. I fought it for a long time, but now I think it's just me, and I've got to use it to its maximum impact. But egg tempera is a beautiful medium, and because it's water-based, it dries instantly, so you build it up with tiny brush strokes. It means you can't. The reason I went to oil after 20 years was I wanted to try working big again. And for me to do that in egg tempera would have taken 6 months. Because you can't use big brushes. So you can't push the paint around quickly. But it gives you fabulous control if you're a control type person like I am, obviously.
So with that in mind, how do you know when the painting's finished?
Well, every painter in this audience will know the answer to this one. You never know it's finished. You decide when to abandon it. Really? That's the simple answer. You reach a stage where you realize that what you're doing is making no difference. No real difference. So get out of it. You're always thinking about the next one anyway. So it's just a stage of recognition. It's sort of like writers like you. You can tinker forever. Commas, do I put an and in there or not? It doesn't matter in the end. You know when what you're doing isn't making any difference. Yeah.
Could you talk a bit about these paintings behind us, Grahame? I believe 2 of these are for sale. We will go into auction. Could you just give us a bit of a history of what we've seen behind us?
Yeah, I haven't seen these paintings since I did them. The big one of the Simpson Desert, I was asked to do a portrait in the 1980s of a chap called Nigel Crease, who had been headmaster of Christ College in Dunedin, in Christchurch. And he had left Christ College to go to be principal of Melbourne Grammar, much to the consternation of the Christ College board, who thought there was no higher heaven than Christ College, of course. But Nigel thought there was one in Melbourne Grammar. So they didn't commission his portrait. There was always a portrait done of the headmaster. They didn't commission the portrait of Nigel until about 4 years after he'd left. They were so annoyed at him. Anyway, they asked me to do it. And I went over to Melbourne and did the drawings of Nigel Crease and got on really well with him, really liked him. He was a fantastically interesting man. And the habit amongst the staff, some of the staff of Melbourne Grammar, was every May holidays to go in their 4-wheel drives for an adventure. About half a dozen of them, each in their own vehicles. And Nigel and Val said, "Do you want to come? We're going through the Simpson Desert." And I'd always loved the paintings of Sidney Nolan and Birdsville Track and Arthur Boyd and people like that, Russell Drysdale. So I really was interested in the outback, and I was there like a shot. And we went in Nigel's big Toyota, and there was Nigel Crease and Val, his wife, and the head of English literature at Melbourne Grammar, and me in our vehicle. And this was 2 weeks driving up through Coober Pedy and past Lake Eyre and Lake Eyre, and up to Pepple's Corner and across the state line and down the Birdsville Track. It was just wonderful. And we were in the vehicles day after day after day across the desert. And the desert is sand dunes, low and then a bump. It's not sand, but it's got vegetation on it. But it's desert vegetation, and you go up a bump and down and across the wadi and up a bump, and it was day after day like this. And it was really interesting because in order to entertain yourself on this journey, everyone, and each of 4 of us, told every story we ever knew. And I've said before that it was rather like the Canterbury Tales. It was the headmaster's story and the head of English's story. And it came out day after day in wonderful intimacy and very entertaining. These were highly intelligent people. And I just loved it. And every night there was a sort of gathering of all the vehicles and all the talk and booze and everything you can imagine. It was just a great adventure, and I loved it. And it was like being on another planet. If you've ever been, I'm sure some of you have been into the interior of Australia, it literally is like being on, Mr. Musk would love it, because it's like being on Mars. And I just thought it was so surreal. It was so unearthly. And I think this painting, one of the sunsets, came out of that. And I can see now that I've seen it again for the first time in nearly 30 years, I can see that it's the surreal, strange beauty of it that was fascinating to me at the time. Boy, it happened night after night. It was wonderful. We also got rain and couldn't move for a couple of days because the sandy track turned into mud, and you're not allowed to drive on it because as soon as it dries, your wheel tracks set like concrete. And it makes it really difficult for anyone following. So I actually spent a day lying underneath the Toyota four-wheel drive out of the rain, which was really strange in the desert. Believe me, it was a weird place. And I think weird and absolutely wonderful. And I think this painting is something about that. This one is the Ida Valley, which is close to where Thea and I live. Next valley over, and that's the Hawktons and the Ida Range behind in the last of the evening sun. And this is a place that's always fascinated me. I say again, I never quite know why, but this is Brass Monkey Hill, and the Brass Monkey notion was established probably 30 years ago for motorbikers. In the middle of winter in Central Otago, someone came up with the idea that it would be a really good idea to have a gathering of motorbikers freezing to death in the middle of Central Otago winter at Oturihua in the Ida Valley. And this is one of the strange little constructions on the Brass Monkey Hill where once a year, middle of May or June or whatever it was, ideally frozen or snowy or, huge amounts of ice and everyone standing around drums with fires in them to try and stay warm. And what's happened in the last 10, 15 years, of course, is that it's not quite as cold as it used to be. So the notion of it being called the brass monkey was that old phrase of freezing the nuts off a tractor or something, I don't know, something to do with being really cold. And this was on the Brass Monkey Hill, but the motorbikers are gone, and this is all that's left behind. I love that sort of relic notion. Hints of what, you've got to... I shouldn't tell these stories, really, in some ways, because I want people to wonder for themselves and not necessarily have the answer. But the oddity, the strangeness of these things has always appealed to me, and that's just me. Every other person would walk past it, and so they should.
You are 76, not 77, as somebody said earlier on.
Yeah, shame.
But you say you have not done your best work yet. Can you explain what you're going to do next?
Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do next. Yes, I am this extraordinary age. I mean, you know what it's like. It's I can remember everything about that 50 years ago, that first exhibition in Custom Street East, the Lee Cramp Gallery. And it was the one that Peter Webb and Bob Ballard were invited in to try and resurrect because it wasn't doing too well. Partly because it had white shag carpet on the floor and white shag carpet on the damn walls. Can you believe it? Anyway, I mean, that's 50 years ago, and I can remember it. So, we all remember these things with awful clarity. My feeling is that this is an extraordinary, fortunate life, being an artist, and these opportunities and gifts I've been given by other people have been unbelievable, truly, literally unbelievable. Who would have imagined it? I haven't had a boss since 1974, which is amazing to me. But I don't think I've done my best yet. I think I want to live longer, mainly because I want to do better than I've done now. And I think I can. And I think it's partly to do with the confidence of believing in my own impulses and the arrogance not to listen to anyone, which I learned many, many years ago. And the things that I've got in my head that I still want to do, I think are better than anything I've done. And I'm just hoping I'm given the time and the health to be able to do them. I'm not scared of dying or anything, but I just don't want it to happen yet because I've got all this stuff I want to do, and I'm hoping I can. And I'm in a very fortunate position. I have my wonderful wife, Fee, makes life, for me, absolutely ideal in that she enables me to do nothing but work. She looks after everything that I hate doing. And she even knocks on the studio door every time she comes in. It's my domain, it's my world, and I'm there to work, and we're a wonderful partnership because she believes in my role, which is to make the paintings, and her role, which is to enable those paintings to be made by taking on everything else, which I absolutely admire and love happening. It's been fantastic, and I think it will continue to be fantastic for me, provided health holds up. And who knows, we can never be certain of that, but fingers are crossed. And I've got, for example, a series of winter paintings I want to do, which will be probably more abstracted than a lot of the earlier stuff. I would love to do a whole suite of figure paintings that are sort of hovering, and you just never know what's going to grab you most. It could be something that I see tomorrow that becomes very urgent, or it could be something that's been hovering and nagging at me for years.
Interiors?
Interiors I love, yeah. I've come across a situation in a house near Arrowtown which is absolutely beautiful in my eyes. I must just, before I say anything else, I've got to get this across while I've got a sort of prisoner audience. My belief is that it's part of the role of paintings to elevate the ordinary. My job is to be a better noticer than everyone else. This is only one of the things that art can do. But my job in it, as one figure in a whole plethora of different characters and personalities, I see my role as being that of drawing attention to things that everyone else might miss. And by turning things into art, ordinary things, very ordinary things, by turning them into art, you elevate them into a new level of attention and noticing. And I think that's really important. I also want to try to find beauty where no one else does, and remind people that for all the appalling things that are going on in the world, and don't start me on that, but there is also an extraordinary amount of beauty still available to us. And I see it as partly my job to bring attention to it and to give it a final form that everyone else, if they are interested, can notice and remember and be aware of. So if you take nothing else away but this from this little conversation, that notion of elevating the ordinary is really important to me, and finding beauty in that ordinary is also critical. And I think paintings can do that. Other people use paintings for other reasons. They they can use it to deliver a message or a political theme or something like that, something that matters to them. That doesn't interest me in the slightest. Never has. I've never done a political painting, really. And it doesn't interest me. I don't find it interesting in other people's work. But that's me. It's as simple as that. I think there are hidden beauties that it's partly the artist's job to unearth and give a form that everyone else can notice if they're remotely interested. And I'm grateful to this audience because you're here because you're interested. But not many are. Don't fool yourself. Art doesn't matter to most people, much to my sadness. But you're here because you are interested, and you've probably got paintings at home. And I hope when you're looking at them, if you look at them long enough and wonder why they are like this, that you're getting some sense of lives that are not yours and personalities that are not like you, but they're doing something which obviously appeals to you for some reason. That constant wondering is what makes art important, and that's what helps build a culture. I see my role in this as being one of the bricks in the wall of the culture that we're building. I know that I'm representative of a particular type of New Zealander, but it's not my job to do anything else but represent me. And if the work's good enough, the cultural wall will become noticeable and significant. And it's brick by brick, different artist by different artist. Is that us, Richard?
Thank you all.